First of all, pleasure being here. Great sessions this morning. Really enjoyed listening to these. So it's a privilege to be here. My name is Nikhil Anand. I'm with Sutherland. I head what's called Digital Business Services, essentially all our enterprise business process management and technology services covering finance and accounting, HR, supply chain, risk and compliance. So pleasure to be here, Saurabh. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, fantastic. So look, Nikhil, you and I both have been in this industry for donkey's years, fortunately or unfortunately. And we, to the last question that the gentleman asked, we in this industry have always bought and sold services for presence, not performance, right? It's always been about FTEs, rate cards, all of that. And honestly, I don't know how do you buy AI like that. Then we are sort of, it's almost like you're buying streaming services, but you're counting DVDs. How does that work? So how do you make AI pricing work, right? And I'm asking you this because you at Sutherland have potentially more, somehow or the other, more outcome-based deals than most.
Yeah. No, it's a great question, and it's a tough question, right? It's not easy to, first of all, forget about how do you price AI. I think just when you talk about outcome-based deals, the reason there are so little of them in the industry is it's fundamentally hard. It's fundamentally hard because I think in the morning somebody said, it's a mindset shift, right? I don't know who said it, but the whole idea, cost is so easy to measure. It's atomic. Everybody understands it very well. Cost, productivity, these are relatively easy for all of us to understand, especially in the service provider industry. We understand this. We've been doing it for 3 decades plus. We get it. Outcomes requires you to start linking economic output to your work. And there is fundamentally, it's very uncertain at that level, right? There are so many things that go into delivering an outcome that it becomes quite hard in the way we today speak to enterprises and the way enterprises are organized themselves to be able to figure this out. So, I mean, simple point, no enterprise is organized as a process, right? You're organized in departments and divisions, right? Outcomes are not by division. Outcomes are by process. So if you talk to somebody in an enterprise and say, what is the outcome you're trying to go for, you're going to get a different answer depending on who you speak to, right? So the clarity around what that outcome means is quite hard to define. And I think that's the fundamental reason why it kind of becomes hard. And the other reason is also when we as providers and talk to clients, right? It's rare initially to handle end-to-end processes for clients. So you get into handling portions of work, right? And then, so therefore, are you accountable for only that portion or are you accountable for the whole piece, right? So unless you fix that fundamental piece, right? Defining specifically what is the outcome you're looking for and then how specifically both client and provider will work together to bridge that gap, right, of accountability, it becomes very, very complicated to do.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. But I'll also, let's say we get all those things fixed. We have wonderful people with wonderful open mindsets and all of that. And Sutherland is soup to nuts doing everything.
Okay.
But let's say we go there. I have still seen outcome-based or pure gain sharing deals fail. Because gain sharing looks very sexy on day zero. There's people high-fiving each other. Hey, we'll do gain sharing, we'll share outcomes and all that. But by day 5, everybody's pointing fingers at each other. This is not what you did. This is what I did. Why should I give you for this? And I don't know how to budget for this and all of that. So how do you build that risk-sharing mindset also is important because you need to execute on this as well. It's not just about signing the deal, right?
Absolutely correct. And even after, we got about, in our business, we have about 60% of contracts that have some element of risk sharing. outcome-based. And even then, it's always a challenge, right? The question is, I think it comes down ultimately to transparency, right? And transparency builds trust. I think fundamentally and we have gotten this wrong, okay? We get it right most of the time, but I'll tell you, there are times when even with our experience in outcome-based contracts, we get it wrong. And you get it wrong badly. And it always, when you kind of go back and rewind the tape and trying to learn from where we could have done better, it almost always comes down to, was there sufficient transparency on both sides? Did we build that trust foundation that says, look, we cannot deliver this alone and you cannot deliver this alone. We need complete transparency on your data, right? That is often the starting point where we hit a roadblock. Everybody wants us to be able to drive outcomes in processes where we don't at all have access to, insight to, or control the data. And yet, particularly in the AI world, if that data foundation is not transparent, visible, and of high quality, we will inevitably fail. Almost certainly we will fail, right? And so having that level of transparency is fundamental, I think. It builds the trust. I think second thing I would say is that we require a very honest conversation about exactly what outcome are we going for, right? I come from a finance and accounting background, so anybody who's kind of looked at this will understand, first outcome we go and talk to people about is, I'm going to impact your DSO. It is the hardest metric in the world for somebody to actually impact. It is are you going to manage billing? Are you going to manage collections? Are you going to manage bad debt? Who's responsible for it? I cannot control bad debt if your fundamental contracting with the client or with your customer has some issue in it. So there has to be a lot of honest conversations when you're setting up these contracts to know what each one of you is signing up for and who's accountable. You don't deliver the outcome on your own. This is the fundamental thing is you got to do it with your clients. It is not service provider responsibility and it's not client responsibility. And I've seen us also make that mistake where we say, we'll guarantee the pilot. Everything beyond that, we don't control, that's on you. That doesn't work, because I think I heard somebody say on this previous panel that pilots are controlled experiments. By their very definition, you remove all noise from an experiment because you're trying to prove a point.
Correct.
And so pilots will almost always succeed. If you are careful about what you're gunning for, a pilot will work. But the moment you leave the test track and come onto the freeway, then all of a sudden, us as providers can't take a step back and tell the client, now this is your problem, scaling is your issue, dealing with tech debt is your issue, we did our job, we are not going to sign up for that ultimate outcome. And if we recognize that we also have a role to play in that to sort of come together and offer the right kind of support at the right level, then I think it works. We have seen examples of this work and we have seen examples of this not work. But like I said, fundamentally, to my mind at least, it comes down to radical transparency. Back in our engineering days, guys might not know, but Saurabh and I come from the same engineering school. We used to study the Japanese Kaizen principle, right? And that, in order to make improvements to the supply chain, it emphasized radical transparency between suppliers and customers across the chain. It couldn't work without it. We don't see that happening in the services industry so much. There is a lot more resistance, sometimes for good reason. You have client confidentiality agreements, you have other things. But unless we bridge that gap, I have found it to be a very difficult conversation to, have a true outcome-based kind of contract in place with the client.
Yeah. No, thank you for being so real about this, Nikhil. But before I let you go, any more tough questions? Because ask him. Any more tough questions for Nikhil? Otherwise, I have one. I'll ask you. Nikhil, I think we talked a lot about agentic washing today, where everything is AI first solution.
Right.
Where do you think there's real traction versus where are we overpromising this thing?
Okay, that's a tough one. I think there is real traction, okay? I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure there is real traction. We are seeing real traction across processes, whether it is customer service, whether it is HR, whether it is risk and compliance in regulated industries. There is definitely ROI, there is definitely traction that is happening. I think where the narrative gets a little bit muddy is how we look at the quantum of the ROI and how fast we are going to get there. That's where the challenge comes, because I think everyone in the quest to build the business case dramatically underestimates the effort it takes to go from, like you said, the racetrack to the freeway. That's where I think everybody underestimates cost, time, length of time, right? So I think all of those things result in timeline getting longer and effort being a lot more. There is a lot more friction in scaling than most people actually even budget for. And I think that's where the hype and expectation setting kind of get a little bit out of hand. So I don't think people are making mistakes with attacking processes. If you choose a decent process, if you think deeply about the outcomes you're trying to go for, I mean, like the DSO example, if you think very deeply about it, you will be able to generate ROI. Of that, I have no doubt. But I think expectation setting around, here are our real challenges in being able to scale this. This is what it will cost for us to do this. And therefore, our ROI timeline is not 24 months, it may be 36 months, it may be 48 months. I think if we set that expectation correctly, then you're not over-promising. I think it comes down to expectation setting at the end of the day.
Fantastic.
Appreciate
man.
it.
Thank you so
for the
much.
opportunity. Thank you, everyone.